it's often helpful to provide a contrasting example to the point that is being made. A situation that does not exhibit any of the qualities and objectives of the lesson. So in our case, it may be instructive to begin with an example of an individual who lived unintelligently, who did not exhibit life IQ, or in the parlance of the time, hashtag life IQ failed. This is a story about a friend of mine. To protect the identity of my friend, I'm simply going to refer to him not as his real name, but with a name that rhymes with his real name, again, to protect his identity. So my friend Byron and I were both DJs in college. Now Dennis Toom is over here going, Dyron, Thyron, Siren. I didn't have a friend named Siren here. My friend Byron and I were both DJs in college. And I worked on the radio because it was part of my work study. Byron worked on the radio because it was part of his passion. My radio name was Joe Christian. Last name first is Christian Joe, and I'm on your radio, 94.5 KCFS. But here's the thing, hardly anybody was listening. I had maybe 3 or 4 calls my entire 3-hour shift. And when they would call and request a song, I would purposely wait about 20 minutes to give the impression to my listenership that I had so many phone calls and requests coming in that I just simply couldn't put them on the air right away. Because the station featured student DJs, there was occasions of dead air. Some due to simple inexperience of transitioning between songs, and sometimes they simply didn't show up for their shifts. But there was times that it was totally legitimate that there was some dead air, because during breaks, KCFS didn't have enough people to cover, and so it wouldn't be in operation. But my friend Byron, he was a die-hard DJ, and he took it upon himself to keep the airways going, covering many shifts himself. At that time, when I was in school, the radio station was way up there in Jeske. And we would typically broadcast from noon to midnight. And on one Saturday over a break, my friend Byron took it upon himself to cover all 720 minutes by himself. He brought a cooler full of food and beverages. He dashed down and back up the stairs to relieve his bladder, all in time to crossfade into the next song. Hour after hour, he kept at it. There weren't any phone calls, but that wasn't totally unheard of. After all, this was break and hardly anyone was around. But he kept his spirits up, thinking about how much better people's days were going because of the great variety of music he was spinning and the witty infusions that he had during that time. At midnight, he signed off, mentally and physically exhausted, but he was quite proud of himself. As he climbed to the top of Jeske to turn off the transmitter and complete the final step of his broadcasting day, he reflected on the solid job that he had done. It was at this point when he went to turn off the transmitter, only to discover he never turned it on. I'm always fascinated with human behavior, especially in the wake of a massive screw-up. The cognitive dissonance he had to be experienced at that moment had to be unbelievable, and so I was peppering Byron with questions. And Byron said he just stared at the switch for a few minutes, collecting his thoughts. Then he made a vow not to tell anybody about this embarrassing episode, but then he decided he could trust me not to repeat the story to anybody. But in my defense, it seems like there was a clause somewhere in the confidentiality contract that said, you know, if that story made an illustration in front of 1,000 people at a commencement address, then it was okay.